Hi everybody, Grandad here again. What am I up to today? Well, today I'm taking a look at some of my specimens of old bones and things, and fossils. Although the thing I'm going to talk to you about today isn't really a fossil. It's still very much a bone, and it dates back about 10,000 years. Now, about 10,000 years ago in England was a time of the last ice age, and people, human beings, or cavemen as you might call them, were coming over the land bridge on the channel, which they call Doggerland, and coming up through, following the game, up into England. And several different peoples came to settle in England, and there were some early ones which are very primitive peoples, and they didn't stay very long, and they, strangely enough, were actually cannibals. They found evidence in the bones and bits and pieces that they found relating to those people that they were actually eating human flesh, and so there was cannibalism going on in England many thousands of years ago. But later on some more people came, and they sort of settled in England and started to live there. Now, one of the places which they settled in England was an area of Somerset in central England known as Cheddar Gorge. Now, I'll show you a picture of Cheddar Gorge, or at least a couple of pictures. There's a picture of what Cheddar Gorge looks like. If you're not familiar with it, if you're not from England and you're not familiar with Cheddar Gorge, it's a huge limestone canyon. Not as grand as the Grand Canyon in America, but for England it's quite an area of outstanding natural beauty. I mean, it's a huge canyon, and it's probably the only true canyon that we've got in England, and it's carved out by limestone, the rivers flowing down, cutting their way through limestone, which has created this huge canyon. Now, as you might expect, this canyon, and I'll just show you another view of it. There's another view of the canyon, slightly different. It shows a bit more countryside there. But this was an ideal place for both animals and humans. Now, in this canyon, or Cheddar Gorge, there's a number of caves. Now, one of the famous caves there is known as Gough's Cave, and that's been there for been known of for many hundreds of years, and they found skeletons in there. Now, one of the skeletons, which was almost whole, had been placed in one of these caves, and he's known as Cheddar Man. Now, I've got a picture of him here, just as he was in his skeleton when they found him. Now, that's the remains of Cheddar Man. And he's quite a famous thing to see. If you ever go to Cheddar Gorge, you probably see a replica in the cave. When you go into Gough's Cave, you see a replica of Cheddar Man. And just recently, there's been a program made about Cheddar Man where they examined his DNA. And they examined the skull and try to put flesh on the bones, as it were, to figure out what Cheddar Man was actually like. And surprisingly enough, after they'd done all their research, they discovered that Cheddar Man actually had blue eyes, curly hair, and was dark-skinned. And they actually made a reconstruction of him, and I've got a picture of it here. Now, I don't know how well it shows up, but he's quite dark-skinned and has most beautiful blue eyes. So that's what they think early man who inhabited Great Britain was like. Now, as well as Cheddar Man, the reason he was here was because he was looking for somewhere to live, and he was looking for game to hunt. Now, the sort of game that he would be hunting would be the woolly mammoth. There we've got a woolly mammoth. And I did another video quite recently about the Shropshire woolly mammoth, where I went on the dig to dig up remains of some woolly mammoths that actually were in Shropshire where I live, and we dug them up. But I'm sure there was some down in Somerset as well, in Cheddar Gorge. Now the other animals that were there, because they weren't alone, and there was another animal which was probably roaming about, and that would be a woolly rhinoceros. And there's a woolly rhinoceros. Now the reason they know about these creatures, that they actually lived in England, because they found remains of them. And there's another one which I believe was found remains of, and that's a sort of more of an elephant. It's not really a woolly mammoth, it's more of an elephant with very long tusks. And that apparently was able to get over into England, and maybe early man hunted those. I don't know, maybe they did. Now I haven't got a picture here, but they also hunted cattle, large aurochs, very big, about 4 times as big as a normal cow, and they were a sort of a buffalo type creature. I haven't actually got a picture of one, but I got a picture of an elk here, which again, I'm sure early man probably hunted in Cheddar Gorge. Now these are pretty scary animals, and this one is another animal which was probably about, and this is getting more to bones. This is a skull and bones of a saber-toothed cat, and there was probably lions as well. Now I'll just see if there's anything else. Oh, there's a picture of a lion. He's not exactly attacking a large buffalo type creature there, but I don't think that really was what the cows were like, those large cows which I told you about. But those are cave lions, so there's undoubtedly lions there. Now most of these animals, and there's another one I'll just show you because I happen to have a picture of it. This is a hyena, and that's a cave or a hyena which is probably found in Britain. Now all these animals were in Britain, but most of these animals would keep themselves to themselves pretty much. I mean, maybe the leopard or the lion would have hunted man, but certainly not a mammoth. I mean, a mammoth is a bit like an elephant, and he's not likely to go bothering man. I mean, they would you'd soon see one. If one was coming, you'd soon see it, so they wouldn't be able to sneak up on you very well. And being such a big animal, they don't fear anything, so they wouldn't fear man, so the chances of it being attacked by a woolly mammoth was probably a bit remote. But one of the creatures that would have been hunting man, and I'm sure would have been very dangerous, was, and I've got a picture of one here, if I can find it, was a cave bear. Now I got a picture here of a pretty fierce looking cave bear, and this is what they think they must have looked like. I mean, they're very furry and very fierce. Unlike the brown bear, which in comparison looks quite friendly and cuddly. That's a brown bear, but he looks very friendly and cuddly. I'm sure he wasn't, but he certainly looks as if he might have been. So the cave bear was something I would think early man would have feared. Now we know that early man lived in Cheddar Gorge because we've seen his bones, but also in Cheddar Gorge a friend of mine managed to get hold of some bones of a cave bear. Now I've got the bones here and I'll show them you. Now these bones were found in a cave in Cheddar Gorge, and the chap that dug them up, I didn't actually dig them up, but the chap that dug them up left a little note with them, and I've got it here. It's not easy to see, but he wrote what it was: Plasticine, 10,000 years old, cave deposits, Westbury, Sub-Mendips, Somerset. So that tells you where it was. And he's got the cave bear there. And I think it's Ostrus digener or something. And I don't know exactly what the Latin term for cave bear was. You can look that up if you want to find out about it. But he's even drawn a little map of where the cave was. I'm sure from that map he's drawn, you wouldn't be able to exactly tell where the cave was. But it was somewhere in Cheddar Gorge. And what I've got here is some bones and some teeth. Now I'll start off by showing you one of the biggest bones. And this was undoubtedly, if you look at it, it's a very big bone. And this is a canine tooth. So it would have fitted, if I can demonstrate, up in the upper jaw like this, pointing down, and this was the business end. This is the end where the bear would have actually bitten you, if you were unlucky enough to get in his way. And this part, the bigger part, was the root, which would have been up in the skull of the animal. So only this lower part would have actually been sticking out. But even so, you can imagine the powerful bite that this creature would have had. Now in this box here, I've got lots of teeth from this cave bear. And I'll just bring up a few of them. That's one of the canines I showed you. This is one of the molars. And if I bring that in, you can see it's got two roots and a biting surface. Now you also may notice that some of the colour of this tooth is a little bit different. The colour on the front here is a little bit different to the back. And that's because these teeth were very damaged. There was a lot of damage on these teeth. Now I managed to glue what parts I could back together, but obviously there was bits missing. So what I did to make it back into a whole tooth was to add on the little bits as best I could what I think the actual tooth was like when it was in one piece. So these shaded areas here, they're slightly different colour, and I've left them like that to show that they're not actually the real tooth. But that gives you some idea of what a molar of a cave bear would look like. Now I've got lots of different teeth here. This is a whole one. This has had no restoration. A little bit of the root might be missing. But this again shows you the biting surface and the root, which would have been down in the jaw here, of the cave bear. Now, they say that bears are very grumpy. And when you look at the teeth of this bear, you can understand why. Because the teeth are very, very worn. I mean, this tooth, which is actually broken, the root's broken off here, and I've repaired it a bit. But on the side of it, you can see where one tooth has mashed up against the other. So these two teeth, or teeth like this, would have rubbed together as he opened and closed his mouth to cause a scissor action. The one tooth was rubbing against the other tooth, and he's rubbed quite a dent in that tooth where the other tooth has been up against it. Now some of the other teeth, this one in particular, has got tremendous wear on it. This tooth, I haven't repaired the end of it, although I think I might have it in here, I might have broken off. But this tooth has got tremendous worn down area there. That area there is really worn down. And you can even see that there's a hole through to where the root was. So this bear, close to his end of his life, must have been really grumpy, because he must have had terrible toothache. And I've got a whole stack here of smaller teeth. I'll hold my hand out and I'll just place them on. But all the teeth of this cave bear, and I've got about 10 of them, different ones, different teeth from different part of the jaw. These are probably front teeth, and every one has got tremendous wear on it. So I should think this must have been quite an old and very grumpy. This one's worn so far down that the tooth's completely worn away and all you've got is the root. So his tooth had worn right down to the gum line. So this bear must have had terrible tooth decay and very worn down teeth. So I rather fancy he was getting towards the end of his life. He must have been quite an old bear. Because maybe because he was a bear, he was very strong, he wouldn't be food for any other animal. Mountain lions may capture him, but the fact that he managed to get into his cave meant that he probably died in his cave. Now in this other box I've got lots of other bones, and there's a part of a leg bone. Now these are still bone, they're not fossilized, they're not stone. They're very hard, but they're still very much bone. So that's part of a leg bone or an arm bone. I don't quite know what part of the bone it is. And I've got lots of them in here. This one is another part of the skeleton of this cave bear. And I've even sectioned this one. I cut it in half so you could see the inside of it. And you can see the texture inside that is still very much bone. It hasn't turned to stone. And again, I'm not sure what bone that is, but it's part of a knuckle bone or an arm bone or something of a cave bear. And in this particular one, now I'm not sure that this is actually part of the cave bear. This might be part of the animals that he was eating. He may well have grabbed an animal and taken it into his cave to eat it, because amongst all this bones that were in the cave, there was a lot of debris, a lot of remains of the meals and the dinners and whatever the cave bear had dragged into his cave to eat, and that's all in this debris. I got a bag here and it's full, well not full, but pretty much a lot of pieces of the debris from the bottom of the cave. This was chiseled out. Now this is certainly, you can tell there's bits of bones in it, the bits of debris, all sorts of bits in the bottom, and feces. I've no doubt there was all sorts of bits and pieces that this bear had left behind in the bottom of this cave where he lived. There's a bit of bone on that one. So these were almost certainly the things that the cave bear was actually eating. He was catching the smaller animals and taking them back to his cave and eating them. And I've got a whole box full of bits and pieces here. Again, I'll lay them on the hand, just hopefully so you can see them. But lots of bits and pieces of this cave bear. So he undoubtedly managed to get back to his cave to die. Now whether he died of starvation or some sort of illness, I don't know. There's a tiny bone there, which is almost certainly one of his finger bones of this cave bear. And I mean, they're a bit unable to decipher. I mean, I'm not terribly well up on anatomy of animals. Probably somebody who is more expert could look at these bones and tell you exactly what part of the cave bear they were, whether it's paws or its legs, back legs, front legs, and where exactly they all came from. But they're certainly very interesting, and it just adds to the story of what was going on in Cheddar Gorge 10,000 years ago. And I think it's interesting. I hope you do too. And I was actually got these bones in order to sell them, but I thought they were so interesting that I didn't know whether people would actually want to buy little bones like this. I don't know, but keeping them together in one piece may well have been the best plan. So I've got my cave bear, and as I say, he must have been a very grumpy cave bear, because judging by his teeth, towards the end of his life, he probably must have suffered very bad with toothache. Still, I found it interesting. I hope you did. And that's the end of my little story about the Cheddar Gorge cave bear. And if you go to Cheddar Gorge, I'm sure you can find bits and pieces. I think there's a museum there where you can go, and I think they've got bits of cave bear, I'm not sure. I did go in it when I visited Cheddar Gorge. But certainly it's a very interesting place. And it tells the story of early life in Britain, just after the last ice age. Well, that's the end of my little talk today. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope to bring you some more interesting videos on geology and fossils that I've got, especially teeth. I'm fascinated by teeth, and I've got a lot of teeth, so maybe the next video I do will be something on teeth. So until that time comes, I'll say bye bye for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye now. Bye bye.